At this time, it is my pleasure to introduce today's guest speaker. Longtime friend, mentor, congressional candidate, PGA golf professional, and kangaroo board presider. He also spent his share of time in the Navy, 30 years in fact. Some of the time as a Command Master Chief at Commander Patrol Reconnaissance Force Pacific and a Command Master Chief for Compact Fleet. It is my distinct honor to introduce Command Master Chief Retired, Maurice Mo Radke. Thank you.
Okay, Dave, if you want to take more pictures, you're going to have to stand off to the port side or starboard side so they can all see you. This podium is already big enough. So to come out here and have my name thrown into the same sentence as Harold Estes, you don't know what an honor that is for me to have my name included with yours, Harold, and God bless you. Good afternoon and aloha. Oh, that was just terrible. Let me explain something, and most of you probably already know it, but you're going to get this counseling anyway. When you aloha me, you're actually alohaing Brett and Tasha and his family and many things. You're saying aloha to special guests Harold and Admiral Tomney and Captain Morgan Jones and all you other Chief Petty Officers and guests that are out there. So when you're saying aloha, it's just not me saying aloha. It's aloha to everybody and everything. So we'll just try that one more time. Good afternoon and aloha.
Aloha.
That'll do. Well, for starters, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the man that we honor here today. Brett, first, I'm honored that you asked me to be your guest speaker, and I'm reminded that if somebody is not poking any fun at you, well, you're not very well liked. So I will tell you today that you're going to find out that you're loved. I might not be your safest bet to be your guest speaker. You probably didn't account for the risk that was involved, but here I am. Today is a day of honor. A day to remember, a day of priorities. And I say priorities because I'm reminded of the story of the third-class petty officer, the chief, and the command master chief, who had their aircraft ditched in hostile waters. They had to swim to shore where they were promptly captured. And they were scheduled to be executed by the firing squad. It was a sad, sad day. But their captors, benevolent as they were, granted them each a wish. The third-class petty officer wanted to have a steak dinner with lobster and all the trimmings and a beautiful aged bottle of scotch before he was shot. The command master chief requested that he be allowed to address all those present about career review boards and performing to serve in the new Navy. And the chief petty officer, ever vigilant and ever mindful of the position of the command master chief, requested to be shot before the master chief spoke. And I assure you here today that I'm a speaker with a different set of priorities, and my intention is, similarly like the Admirals, to say a few words and then get off of this podium. Because I've sat at these many retirement ceremonies and been where you've been. I've known Chief Brett Herner for coming up on 10 years now. And when I met him, I can't tell you what a perfect pain in the butt he was. He had an air of confidence about him that indicated that any aroma coming from him did not smell. But I really started to know him when he was selected as a Chief Petty Officer, and that's really one of the things that I wanted to talk about today. I was selected to Chief in 1986 and retired in 2006, so I had 20 years in khaki, so I know a little bit about what I'm getting ready to say about this gentleman. Brett's transformation from first-class petty officer to Chief Petty Officer actually inspired me. And I wasn't inspired by what the Chief was doing, or the Chief's mess was doing, what we were trying to instill in him. I was inspired by what he did in taking on the role as the transformee. In very short order, this Chief came to realize that the way he went about doing his business did have an important impact on not just him or his people, but it had an impact on the Chief's mess as well, and the whole Navy. And he saw that right away. I never saw a sailor take on the mantle of what a Chief Petty Officer was expected to do and how it would be done with the attitude and aptitude that Brett displayed. Chief Herner went through his Chief Petty Officer to CPO transition as if it were a religion. And to me, being a Chief Petty Officer in the world's greatest Navy is like a religion. Being a chief is not a job that's left at the brow when you walk off of the ship. It's a job that carries over into our personal lives. Because when something is not right, ashore or underway, at work or off duty, a Chief Petty Officer is compelled to do something about it. To me, being a Chief Petty Officer could be the easiest job in the Navy. You just slap that uniform on and you start sashaying around, just throwing out orders because of all of the people behind you. So it's easy just to throw that uniform on, but being the good chief, like Chief Herner, the good chief, now that is something. It's the hardest thing a person will ever do during a Navy career. There is nothing like being a good chief. The work is never ending. An old CPO saying goes, a CPO is always a CPO, even in their skivvies. Now Brett is one of those good chiefs. The good chief has just enough tact and diplomacy to prevent them from being thrown out of a department head meeting. And sometimes they do get thrown out just to make a point to those that aren't listening. A good chief can make a young division officer feel completely confident in public and completely underprepared in private. A good chief is still working in 1900 helping a young sailor who asks for help to develop a budget. A good chief effectively investigates any situation and gets the truth in the shortest amount of time because the people that know them will know what would happen if they're not completely honest and forthright with their chief. And at the same time, it's that same honesty and straightforward integrity that has made the phrase one of the most common phrases between Chief Petty Officers and officers. And you would think it would be asked the chief. But the one between officers and chiefs that stands out to me is, Chief, what do you think? In my 30 years of service, the greatest Chief Petty Officers are the ones that stay Chief Petty Officers until they retire. And that's because of our promotion system the way it is. I had different tours as a Command Master Chief, actually 6 of them. So I have some experience in leading a chief's mess, and somebody once told me it's like trying to herd some cats. And when I think about that, and I think about Brett, it's more like trying to herd wild horses. And I would seek out people like Brett, those seasoned Chief Petty Officers with opinions, and convince them to take on leadership roles in the mess, which this gentleman did. These were the chiefs that everyone respected, and because they did, naturally, the things that good chiefs do. I had the fortune of having Chief Herner as a new chief in my CPO mess, and from day one, he lived and acted out the ideals that our CPO transition season is supposed to teach. Of course, that happens to a lot of chiefs. They get excited right away, they're pumped up, and they start doing things, and then it starts to taper off. But being a good chief, like Brett Herner, that energy never started to melt away. He was always seeking out what's the next thing to do. What's the next thing I can possibly do? Brett embraced the work, the people, the Navy. Everything that I would want to tell a new chief to keep them motivated and focused, I never had to tell him. When it was his turn to get to the next new crop of CPOs and put him into the fold, he seemed like he was training beyond his years. His enthusiasm, dedication to the process, and more importantly, his belief that the title of Chief Petty Officer and the accompanying chiefly attributes are far greater than any of us as individuals. And I thank Brett for being that example. I figure in the near future, there's going to be a chief somewhere who's being promoted to senior chief or master chief, and he's going to be saying something like, yeah, I remember my first chief, Chief Herner. He really busted my butt. But the unspoken but known meaning is, I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for him. And you just cannot beat that kind of legacy. Chief Petty Officer Brett Herner is a man of honor, integrity, courage, dedication, and commitment. And I know that whatever Brett wants to accomplish, he will. And because Tasha is the biggest part of his life now, she'll provide the appropriate leadership. Yes, a CPO is still a CPO even in their skivvies, but there's always an admiral around. Right, Jill? Tasha, Brett, Jill and I are going to miss you tremendously, but you'll always have a place to stay when you come back and visit us. And I'd like to leave you with this one item, as told by a gentleman named John Reese. He was a World War II journalist and a novelist. At World War II's end, towns and cities were looking for hometown boys who had made good to celebrate their victory with. Los Angeles had chosen to honor Admiral William Bull Halsey, whom it was rumored had done quite well during the war. On the steps of the LA County Courthouse, at the end of the ceremony, Halsey passed through a traditional line of side boys. And these side boys were active duty and retired chief petty officers who had been brought in from all over the country. And Mr. Reese says, I walked to pace the Admiral as he passed through the ranks. When Halsey approached one old CPO who had appeared to me older as any living human I had ever seen, I saw them wink at each other. Later I had the opportunity to chat with the great Admiral. I commented on the wink between Halsey and the old chief and asked Halsey if he would mind explaining it. Halsey looked at me seriously and said, that man was my chief when I was an ensign, and no one before or after taught me as much about ships or men as he did. You civilians don't understand. You go down to Long Beach and you see those battleships sitting there, and you think that they float on the water, don't you? Well, you're wrong. They're carried out to sea on the backs of those chief petty officers. And Brett, you carried more of your share of the load, and we thank you. It has been my honor to speak on your behalf today, and I know wherever life takes you, that you and your entire family are blessed with happiness, good health, and a sense of peace and pride in knowing that you served your country for over 20 years, and you served well. Thank you, God bless you, and aloha.
Will the military guests